So I've made a variety of videos on the legality of electric bikes, specifically in New York, because it's been kind of a contentious topic. I mean, there's been a lot of laws against electric bikes, and more recently, electric bikes have become more legal, if you will. So we've kind of been dealing with this topic for over 10 years. I wanted to make this video just as more of a general legality video in the US specifically, and just to give you a bit of a primer and some insight as to what the laws are and how they work. So I'm just going to answer maybe some of the more common questions that come up in relation to legality. But if you have any other questions yourself, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But I'm also going to point to some resources that could be very helpful in understanding the laws in your specific jurisdiction or in your specific situation if you want to ride on a specific type of trail or that sort of thing. So the first question is it legal to ride an e-bike where I live? Now, this is really going to vary, but for the most part, in the U.S., electric bikes are illegal, and there's a couple different ways that the laws are defined. Now, one of the most commonly referenced laws is a federal law, but it's actually a consumer product safety law, which really regulates the import of electric bikes, and it states that any bike that is under 750 watts and has a top speed unassisted of 20 miles an hour, it's considered to be a bicycle. Now, it could be a little bit confusing because most people interpret this law to say that, okay, this means that as long as my big bike meets these regulations, it's considered a bicycle as the Federal Consumer Product Safety Law defines it. But that's not actually the whole truth, because they're not actually responsible for regulating the use of electric bikes in specific jurisdictions. That's going to be up to specific municipalities and states and that sort of thing. It's kind of been a long process for a lot of the different states to introduce electric bike laws, and maybe some of them haven't found it to be all that important on their list of things to do. As I've learned in New York, when we've been lobbying for electric bike laws for many years, there's always like thousands of items that these legislators are looking at, and if you're talking about electric bikes, maybe they feel like, this is not that important, I don't really care about it. I don't know if that's the case, or they feel like, can we actually get this passed? They have to, put energy behind this thing and have to decide what's going to be most important, what's going to matter to their constituents, all that sort of stuff. But I don't want to get too much into the politics on things. There seems to be this kind of model legislation which was introduced in California many years ago, and it basically defines 3 classes of electric bikes. So there's the first class, which is class 1. It states that a bike that's 20 miles an hour and is pedal assist only. So that means you have to pedal it for it to be able to provide power. Then you have class 2, which is 20 miles an hour throttle activated. And you have class 3, which is 28 miles an hour pedal assist. This legislation seems to be the one that most states are adopting, and a large majority of the states throughout the U.S. have electric bike laws in place which are allowing electric bikes. For the most part, the states that are left, they just really haven't caught up with the current rules and that sort of thing. So it's anticipated that they will. The big group that seems to be working on this topic is People for Bikes. Now, People for Bikes, for those of you that don't know, is a national organization that really helps to encourage better bike infrastructure, better bike safety, and they end up working on a national scale on a lot of different topics, and they can help to distribute grant money and all sorts of different ways to help further this bike movement along. So if you want to learn more about your specific state and your specific jurisdiction, I really recommend checking out some of the resources on People for Bike's website, and they're constantly updating this, and it's pretty much every year there's a new legislative session and there's an opportunity for new laws to pass, and there's always a push to encourage better laws around electric bikes. But for the most part, electric bikes are legal. And if you want to have kind of the most legal electric bike, it's probably going to be a class 1 pedal assist only. That's just going to be kind of the safest version. So if there are some places where there's a regulation against certain types of electric bikes, it's generally not going to be this one. So it's an important thing to consider there. Now, I mentioned California, and since we started in New York, I really should mention the New York City or New York State laws, just to bring things up to date, because we have covered this topic and I plan to do some more coverage on this topic. But basically, electric bikes are now finally legal in New York State. Probably the most articles written around electric bike laws have been about New York City. For a long time, they've had laws that made it illegal to have throttle-activated bikes. Now throttle-activated bikes technically are legal in New York City, and New York State for that matter. Their law specifically throughout New York State is a little bit different than the California legislation, and I think there's a push to get some of that updated and to be clarified. Basically, there was a big push from delivery riders that have fast throttle-activated bikes to find a way to legalize them, and I think there was some confusion in the way that they implemented this law, and they left out some of the more common electric bikes that are otherwise found in the market. So we're hoping that this legislative session this year in 2021, we can work with the state officials there to kind of update this and, sort things out so it's a little bit more clear. Another question that comes up is, do I have to wear a helmet? Now, this is going to vary by state. Certain states have laws specifically that require people to wear a helmet on bicycles, and naturally that same regulation is going to carry over to electric bikes. And there are certain places that have regulations that are more specific towards electric bikes. For example, New York, so Class 1 and Class 2 bikes, it's not required to wear a helmet, but a Class 3 bike, it is required to wear a helmet. And that's actually the same in California as well. So it's important to be mindful of that. I think you'll find a lot of those regulations on the People for Bikes website as well, but it's generally speaking, for the low-speed electric bikes, it's not required to wear a helmet. It's often recommended, but it's important to know what the actual law is. Another important question is, can I ride an electric bike in a bike lane? Now, the answer to this one is generally yes. Generally find that the Class 1 and Class 2 bikes allow for riding in, most paths and that sort of thing, with the exception of maybe some off-road paths for Class 2, where in those cases you might only find that Class 1 bikes are allowed. But for the most part, you can ride an electric bike inside of a bike lane just as you would a normal non-electric bike. I think it's important to note and to consider that you have to be mindful of other riders in the bike lane, because it's not always so easy to pass and that sort of thing. You might find yourself riding a little bit faster or accelerating faster. So I just say, just be courteous. We all are, part of this community of cyclists, or if you want to say it that way. But I think it's important that we work together so everyone can be safe and be respectful, and we can all enjoy this and grow this community together. How about mountain bike trails? I kind of mentioned this before. Can I ride an electric bike on mountain bike trails? This is also similar to the other questions. It's going to vary quite a bit. You're going to see different laws in different states. You're going to see different laws in different mountains, counties, cities, etc. The general direction we see this going is that Class 1 electric bikes will generally be allowed on mountain bike trails. There's certainly many places out there that are still not allowing Class 1 electric mountain bikes, but that's changing every day. And the way I look at this is, it's kind of that nobody wants to be the first one to say that it's allowed. So there's a lot of look to larger organizations or larger jurisdictions to define this a little bit more clearly first, and then it kind of ends up trickling down. A lot of times what ends up happening is these smaller municipalities and jurisdictions borrow the regulations from larger jurisdictions, because they generally have a lot more resources to look into these things and to prepare data and to prepare the best course forward. And if they say, okay, well, I borrowed this regulation from this larger organization, you kind of cover yourself a little bit more than saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to be this trailblazer and say, I'm going to allow it, I'm going to create these rules without, maybe too much data or information behind that. But there's been loads of studies that really there's not all that much difference in trail impact and that sort of thing with electric bikes. And the overall direction is it's going more and more mountain bike trails are allowing it. And There's several notable ones that seem to be really leading this charge, and I think that we're going to continue to see more and more every year, provided that there's no real major issues. I think that we all, again, as I mentioned before, have a great responsibility to be respectful and mindful on the trails, especially in relation to mountain bike trails. You got to consider that many of these trails were built by individuals that put their own sweat into this thing, and they really spent a lot of time doing so. Many of them maybe might have certain feelings about electric bikes. This we have seen in the past. So I think it's important to be respectful and mindful and come with a open mind, and not to just kind of like demand that, hey, I demand access to this trail, or I deserve access to this trail, and maybe rather try to be considerate of the work that was put in and probably be helpful if you can. I found one of the tactics that we've used before is to actually participate in some of these trail building days that can quite often happen on mountain bike trails, and really just try to be helpful. I think that that's a good way just to start a conversation and to, try and start there instead of just saying, you need to allow me. I think that's a good approach and something you might want to consider if the trail in your area might not be giving access to electric bikes currently. Now, another topic that's kind of come up a lot lately is national parks. Now, historically, electric bikes were not allowed on any trails in national parks. However, there's been a lot of new regulations introduced, which has been very positive for the electric bike space, allowing for different classes of electric bikes. One thing to note, as I mentioned before, the throttle-activated bikes, you're not allowed to use them on cycling trails, but for the most part, pedal assist is allowed on cycling trails. But there might be certain places where it's not allowed, and that's kind of ever updating. But the big deal is that recently there's been a regulation published that's kind of allowing the use of them. So it's going to vary a little bit depending on the park and that sort of thing, but for the most part we're moving in a positive direction of allowing more and more electric bikes within these national parks, which I think is a great plus for this community. Another question that comes up quite a bit is an electric bike considered a motor vehicle? And the answer to this question is not that simple, but generally speaking, as mentioned before, because of the law introduced in 2002 for the consumer product safety, it basically defines an electric bike that meets these regulations as a bicycle, therefore not a motor vehicle. It actually specifically says that an electric bicycle is not to be considered a motor vehicle, but instead to be considered a bicycle. However, I believe that a lot of these jurisdictions that are regulating the use, at times they can confuse this a little bit, or maybe decide that this doesn't actually apply to their oversight on the use. Yeah, I mean, I guess it can be argued either way, and it certainly happens to be argued both ways, but I'm interested to know what you think. I mean, I say no. I think that a motor vehicle is kind of a whole nother animal. Maybe it could be considered like a hybrid motor vehicle. I don't know if that actual phrase exists, but I'd say that's more what it is. But just to say that it's a motor vehicle would, from my perspective, imply that it's actually just a motorized vehicle that's only solely operated by that motor. And that's kind of the main difference between from my perspective, a motor vehicle and an electric bike. I guess a throttle-activated one would be kind of more in that class, but the fact that it still has pedals and most people still pedal them, that kind of shifts a little bit. Well, I hope you guys found this video to be helpful. If you have any strange legality questions or things that you'd like answered, please list them below and I'll do my best to answer them. As I mentioned, People for Bikes is an excellent resource for this, and they really have a pretty comprehensive list of all the different states and that sort of thing throughout the U.S., what their rules are and everything like that. And I look forward to seeing you guys in a future video, and see you soon.